All right, welcome back to the Daily Fantasy Flex podcast. It is Sunday night. I'm usually here with Jay, but filling in the man, Pete. What's going on, dude?
Well, not much. Great weekend of sports. Obviously, we had all the basketball going on. Golf was intriguing. Jordan Spieth with an incredible finish to take down the Dean and DeLuca championship. So good for him, and excited for this pod. Nice Memorial Day. Full day of baseball. Obviously, we're diving into the late slate, but yeah, great times and lots of fun stuff going on in the sports world.
For sure, yeah, definitely. There's a lot of good things going on in the sports world, and we will get to the slate, I promise. It's sort of an interesting day, and we have 15 games. But if you actually look at the slate, the later slate is actually only 5 games. So that's what our Flex podcast talks about. We talk about the late slate, or the main slate, I guess you could call it. So it's going to be 5 games, which is a little ugly slate, but we'll talk over it anyway. But first, let's talk through some NBA, Pete. I'm really curious. I want your thoughts on Clay's explosion.
I think Clay is one of the most underrated players, and I've talked about it a lot even throughout the year, how his two-way impact on the Warriors is incredible. He guards a lot of the times the best perimeter player. He's guarding Westbrook for the most part in this series, and really just put the team on his back. Steph hasn't been himself this series, and they needed a lot of scoring to win that Game 6, and he brought it. So he played incredible. I've been on Golden State all year. I was definitely nervous going into Game 6. A lot of talk of hedging and things of that nature. But it worked out that Golden State won, and ecstatic for Game 7. It's going to be sad when the NBA is gone. Regardless, we're going to have a great finals to watch, which is going to be fantastic. But, the NBA playoffs is just the best. I mean, that Game 6 was one of the best sporting experiences I've had in a while, and it was just a truly great game, especially being so invested in the Warriors. And obviously this comeback has just been incredible. But I was so bullish on the Warriors to start, and I was nervous going into Game 6 just because the length and athleticism for Oklahoma City seemed to be, the way to neutralize this Warriors team. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting. Yeah, you're right. I would have been super nervous too. I mean, Oklahoma City crushed them at home the last several games. So, great game from Golden State. I do think it's interesting, and I get that Golden State's definitely the heavy favorite playing at home in Game 7. But I do think it's interesting. Really we flip-flop so much. Like if I just looked at my timeline, you would think that the series is already over. Like there's not even a Game 7, and we just have so much recency bias. Like when before the series started, no one gave Oklahoma City a chance, and then Oklahoma City, went up 3-1, and no one gave Golden State a chance, and now they've evened it up to 3-3. No one's giving Oklahoma City a chance, even though they've already won in Golden State. So I don't know. I don't know who's going to win. Obviously, the odds are in the favor that Golden State's going to win, and probably going to be favored in the NBA Finals. But I don't know, man. I'm just excited to watch it because I think it's going to be a good game. I would take the Warriors, but I'm just hoping for a close game in Game 7.
Someone who's invested in the Warriors, I'm very nervous about Game 7. I think people are starting to get cocky that are back in the Warriors, and it's recency bias. And regardless of where they're playing, this is a very tough matchup for the Warriors. Oklahoma City matches up pretty much perfectly with their length and athleticism against the Warriors, which really stifles their three-point shooting. So, you have Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, 2 of the 5 or 6 best players in the NBA, and they have a shot to win. It's going to be great. I'm really excited for it. Definitely not feeling like this is a lock by any stretch of imagination for the Warriors, and we'll see what happens. It's going to be a great Game 7, I hope. And, the NBA playoffs, I'm going to miss it so much. I mean, baseball is fun, but it's just nowhere near the, entertainment. I just think that the entertainment of the NBA is just so much higher than pretty much every sport. I love the NFL too, but playoff basketball is my favorite, so I'm going to be sad to see it go, but definitely watching these great games that we have.
I know, man. We're in the golden age of basketball. Yeah, I agree. I will say, one last thought on this series, because we're obviously big, huge basketball fans. So I know this is a MLB podcast, so we'll move on in a second. But I do think Oklahoma City is really intriguing for Game 7 because I do think they play a little bit better as underdogs. I think Westbrook and Durant sort of have that. They play better when their backs against the wall or when people don't believe in them. And you saw that earlier in the series when no one gave them a chance. They just came out and crushed. And now they're in a sort of similar position. They were the favorites in the last couple games, and you sort of saw how that. I think Durant was a little nervous coming into the game. It seemed like he was nervous, so maybe he'll come out firing and just not really caring or whatever. So we'll see what happens. But definitely interested, intrigued to watch. And it should be a great game. But I guess we should talk some baseball. So we'll get into the slate. So again, we're gonna talk this main slate, which is the 7:05 slate, 5 games. There's 15 games total, but the later is only 5 games because it's this holiday, Memorial Day. So we'll run through this quickly. We'll start with the Vegas odds. Sort of interesting. There's a couple teams that are pretty high, and then really the other teams are pretty sorted out here. Usually there's a team that's a little bit lower in the 2-ish range, but the low team is Philly at 3.5. So really there's not I think that shows there's not really an ace, which we'll get into when we talk pitchers in a second, but also just sort of an even distribution of games. So maybe that sort of affects how we approach cash in tournament, or at least I think it should. But quickly, Toronto is implied at 5 right now. Pirates are implied at 4.8. Detroit, Miami are at 4.3. Again, Philly's low at 3.5. Angels are at 3.8, and then KC, Tampa at 4. So I almost went over every team there. But you can see the distribution. Usually there's a large gap between the highest team and the lowest team. We don't really see that tomorrow. So I think it's going to be an interesting day or interesting night of baseball for sure. All right, let's move into our segments. So we'll talk 2 intriguing pitchers, and we'll hit a pitcher to fade. Pete, I'll let you go first. Who are a couple pitchers that are intriguing to you on this potentially not so intriguing 5-game slate?
Well, it's a joke of a slate, so it is tough with pitching. But the guy who stands out the most to me is Verlander. I mean, he's really regained his form. I guess he's engaged now to Kate Upton, so that can't hurt. But back-to-back games with 10 strikeouts. I mean, he's you look at his last 4 games, he has 9 strikeouts, 8 strikeouts, then 10 twice. He's pitching deep into games, and it's the Verlander that we've known to love and expect. And the matchup against the Angels isn't the best, but it's also not the worst. The one thing that's a negative is they don't strike out enough. But in that park, it's not too bad. And I like the spot for Verlander relative to the rest of the options. Kennedy is a fine option. The Rays do strike out a good bit versus right-handers, so he does have that working for him in addition to pitching at home in a park where it's very difficult to hit home runs. So those are the 2 guys I'm looking at. It's a pretty gross slate for pitching, but that's just the nature of it. And I think you can definitely gain an edge if you find that one pitcher is being touted the most across the industry to kind of go a different direction, because I don't think there's a huge difference between some of these guys. I do like Verlander the most, but it is an interesting slate. So who do you like a pitcher this slate, Brian?
I mean, no one really. But I like your call. Verlander is interesting. I agree. Sort of, we're looking at our advanced stats. Things sometimes I try to combine them and to figure out which guys are playing well. And one thing that stands out to Verlander is his average fastball speed is up, but his strike percentage is way up as well. So it's not only that he's throwing it hard, but he's throwing it hard while also having great control of his fastball. So that's always like a guy that can not only get a little bit more juice, but is doing it with control, is always sort of a more intriguing pitcher than just a guy who's just beaming it in there without any control at all. So Verlander, you're right, is pitching well right now, and I do think that he is going to be a popular option in his money line. He's the second highest favorite behind Estrada in this slate, is going to sort of show that. One guy that I do think is interesting is Tanner Roark. He had that 15 strikeout game earlier in the year. Coming into this year, I don't think anyone really thought that he was like an amazing pitcher, and not necessarily. I'm not trying to say that he's an elite talent by any means, but if you look at his advanced stats, they're pretty intriguing. He has a distance differential of minus 24 feet, which means that in the last couple starts, he's allowed batted ball distance of 24 feet fewer than his last year. Guys are just not making any hard contact on him. They're making hard. He has a hard hit percentage allowed of like around 20%. So I'm not predicting a strikeout game of 15 strikeouts against Philly by any means, but he does have some stuff going for him in this slate. He just has not allowed any contact this year, really outside of that Marlins game a couple of weeks ago, and he's facing Philly, which is the lowest implied team. So if you're sort of looking at a pivot off of Kennedy and Verlander, I think Rourke just not really allowing guys to hit him and sort of the best matchup on the board. I do think that he is intriguing. The only other guy that I'll mention is on the other side of that matchup is Helix, and he does have some K potential. And really, I think he's mostly intriguing because, again, I'm looking at his advanced stats. Rourke's are great, but Helix's are even better. I don't think that he's an elite talent by any means, but he has been over his expected point differential in the last 3 games, and no one has touched him. He has a distance differential of minus 38 feet. And he's got like a hard hit percentage of like 15%. Like no one has touched him in the last couple of games. So I think on slates like these, you sort of just have to find edges where you can, even if they're really small. And maybe our advanced stats are the way to do that. But I don't know, man. Yeah, it's tough. I think it is interesting. The guy with the best whip and the highest money line percentage is Marco Estrada, which we didn't even mention. So I do think it's going to be interesting in tournaments to figure out where you want to take a stand, which guys you want to fade, which guys you want to have more exposure to in the field, because, it's going to be interesting. There's going to be some volatility in this one.
Every pitcher is viable. I like to call him Rourke. Estrada does rate well. It's a total crapshoot. It's a really tricky slate. On DraftKings, you have to take 2 of these guys. They're all close. They're all close in price. So it is challenging, and this is a perfect spot if you can get a gauge of where the public's going to go contrarian against it, because especially in tournaments, just because I think everything's so close. So very, very tough slate for pitching, but I do stand. I think Verlander is still my favorite guy, but I like Rourke. I think against Philadelphia, you can never go wrong. So we'll see. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah, Harry. So speaking of a guy that you think public might be on, that you might limit yourself in tournaments, who would that be? Who's a guy to fade?
I'm not playing Andreezy at all. Just going against the Royals, who don't strike out that much. He doesn't get that many Ks, and I don't like the spot for him on the road. So he's a guy I'm just not going to play. Eliminate him from the board.
Yeah,
and kind of limit to everyone else who all seem like viable options. I mean, everyone knows Nick Lino for Miami's terrible lock. You're probably not
so bad.
Yeah. Nova against him, but a player that's in play is Andreezy, and I think I'm not going to play him. I'm sorry if I butchered that. I think it's Andreezy. I'm not sure. Andrese, whatever. I'm not playing him.
Close enough, yeah. My pitcher to fade, for the exact reasons that you mentioned just a second ago, is Verlander. And it's not because I don't think he's a great option tomorrow, because I think he is. I think if you're playing cash on the slate for if that's something you like to do, then Verlander's a fine option. But in tournaments, he's the highest priced pitcher. People sort of just naturally take the highest priced pitcher, even if they're not really supposed to be the highest priced pitcher, because they think they're supposed to pay up for pitching. And even if that's true, even if he is the best option, I think there's so much volatility in this slate that I'm just not going to be on the highest owned guy, and I think that's going to be Verlander. So I'm just going to fade him solely for that reason, even if he's the most optimal play on paper. I just don't think there's a super optimal play regardless.
Right.
Cool. All right, let's move into batters. Who are some batters you like tomorrow?
All right, so the whole Blue Jays lineup's in play across the board. That's the highest total, especially in cash games. But one guy that I really like is Bautista. I like the trend of him continuing to lead off. If he leads off here, it just means more at-bats. In this spot, I think he's one of the true elite guys. I know you have a couple players I like as well, but I think he's going to be one of the most popular plays because he's one of the best players in the highest team total.
Yep.
In addition to that, McCutchen, I think, will make a nice contrarian play. I know you're going to talk about the more popular player. I think will be the heaviest owned player, but McCutchen is a great pivot from the guy you're going to talk about, Stanton, here in a second, because he's similar price, has that same righty-lefty matchup that he matches as well, not to quite the same extent that Stanton does, but I think he's a really nice contrarian play, and he's on the road, so a little uptick in at-bats as well. Hasn't quite been himself this season, but a little bit of turnaround. I think this is a great spot for him.
Yeah, I like that call a lot in tournaments for sure. Yeah, like you mentioned, Stanton, I think is definitely a guy you always have to look at. He's going to be very chalk, and really just because it's a small slate. And I don't know, man. Like regardless of any slate, Stanton against the lefties.
His ISO diff and ISO against lefties is just off the charts. I mean, it's not even close to anyone else.
Crazy. Yeah, he's got an ISO of 550 against lefties, so which is insane. I mean, how do you feel about his form this year? Is that's a sort of a debate that I've seen, and I don't really know I stand against it. He's been bad this year. I mean, he's had some games where he's broken out, and you can say you look at his advanced stats and say he's trending up lately, but he hasn't been great lately.
No, he hasn't been great lately, and you'd like to blame it on the lineup, but Ozuna's been hot all year. Yeah, guys around him are hitting the ball well, and you look at FanDuel pricing, for instance. Ozuna is 700 more than Stan. It's absolutely insane. So, yeah, I don't know what's going on exactly. We'll see. But I'm definitely going to keep buying when I can, especially in good spots versus lefties. So I like that call.
Yeah, you just got to revert to long-term stats in a situation like that. But yeah, Ozuna's an interesting guy that is actually my stat of the day. So we'll get to him in a second. The other guy I'll quickly mention is Donaldson. I sometimes like to really target these reverse splits guys that still have crazy upside. I mean, you look at Donaldson, everyone knows that Donaldson is an elite guy against lefties. And same with Stanton. I like typically in a year I like to target him against righties as well because everyone does it against the splits that they're great against. But if you actually look at their ISOs or whatever sort of metric you like to measure their power, they're still great power hitters against the other one. They're just not like Hall of Famers against the other ones, but they still like on a slate have extreme power potential. So Donaldson, even though he has negative splits against righties, he's still got a 244 ISO, which is crazy. I mean, he's still really good. So I like targeting these guys for first splits because you get an ownership discount while also still getting some upside. I don't necessarily think you're going to get a crazy ownership discount on Donaldson because there's only 5 games. But I do think that he is a great play because of that Toronto lineup and their high projected team total. So Donaldson along with Bautista, you definitely got to play. Like you said, all those Toronto bats are definitely cash game plays for sure. All right, you got any value guys that you like?
Value is really tough. One guy that I think is a standout value that will probably be heavily owned is Smoke for the Blue Jays. Way too cheap, probably batting 5th in the lineup. I think he's an elite tournament play. And then it really just depends on the lineups. One guy that we have projected in right now that I think is a really nice contrarian play is Chris Johnson. I think that he makes for a nice play just in general with the splits. He's going to be min price on FanDuel at 2K going against Locke. I assume he'll be in the lineup. We'll see. I hope he is. But, it's a great opportunity to stack Miami. And, you can get Stan, you can get Ozuna, and then you can take Johnson. I just don't think will be owned. And he's a purely punt play, but you can stack the rest of your lineup with bats. And I think that a position where everyone's going to be either taking Smoke, Encarnacion, even Miguel Cabrera, he should come in at a really low ownership percentage, which is great in tournaments.
Yeah, I like that call a lot. One thing I'm going to be doing tomorrow in this slate for sure is getting off Smoke. So I think a lot of people are going to go Smoke Stanton. And if you could somehow go Encarnacion and other outfielder, whoever it may be, that's sort of a similar price to Smoke, where you're just sort of flopping those two guys because everyone's going to go Stanton and Smoke to sort of get both upsides. But if you sort of pivot to a different first baseman, I think that is the contrarian play, is to get to a different first baseman, like you just said. I like that call a lot. My two value guys, really is only one and then sort of just an idea. The first guy's Corey Dickerson, facing a right-hander. He is crazy platoon guy. Now he's not a platoon guy, but he does have crazy splits against right-handers. He's got a 312 ISO against right-handed pitching. I think he's just underpriced right now. So he's definitely a guy I'm looking at if he's in that spot, especially lower in the order. He's definitely a guy you got to look at with power potential. And then the second value guy or value guys that I like is just really just whoever's hitting late for Toronto, whoever it may be, whether Russell Martin is catching or Darwin Barney is hitting in the middle infield. Whoever it may be is underpriced at FanDuel, especially for this projected team total in this bad slate. So when the confirmed lineups come out, look at the end of the Toronto order, and I think you could find some value there. All right, cool. So let's move on. We'll sort of run through a couple quick segments and we'll end it. The next one's going to be a stack that is intriguing. Pete, you got one?
I think the Yankees are an intriguing stack. I think no one's going to be talking about them, and they're on the road in Toronto. They do better against righties, so I'm gonna go to the Yankees. I don't love it, but I think they're at least an intriguing stack on the slate. You can make an argument for a lot of teams, but I'm going to stay in a good park, and I'm going to go with the road team in a good park.
Yeah, no, that's a great call because everyone's going to take Toronto because of that park. And like Coors, everyone takes the Rockies. It's always sort of an interesting idea just to take the other team. You get the ownership discount with still the upside of that park. So good call on that. Speaking of parks, I'm going to take a team that is in an awful park, but I think is in a good spot. Is the Marlins? I think are interesting to me. Really, just because I think they got some batters that could take advantage of Locke. And really, on the other side of that, you look at Pittsburgh going against Nicolina, who's not great, a very bad pitcher. So really, both those teams, maybe that's the game that you stack. You just stack the Pittsburgh-Miami game, even though it's a bad park. I think it's a really good matchup for both teams, both batters. So the Miami team is the stack that I'm looking at heavily, but the Pittsburgh side is also really intriguing to me. That game in general is a good one to target, I think. You got a stat of the day, Pete?
My stat of the day is Young Ho Kong is leading on pro trends for both DraftKings and FanDuel. This is something that's always available to everybody on the lineups page is the pro trends. And if you look at some of his pro trends, I mean, he's crushing hard hit percentage, he's crushing exit velocity, he's doing a lot of things really well. I think he's a guy that makes a lot of sense on that Pittsburgh team. I think they're a chalkier stack that I definitely prefer. You ask me which team I like more, it's definitely Pittsburgh. I just think they're going to be more heavily owned than the Yankees, which is why I went that direction. But I really like him, and since he's come back, he's just been a great bat, and he's a big addition to that Pirates lineup. So pro trends are something that I'm looking at. Our trends tool is now free, and I think it's something that's really valuable. So definitely something I look at on a daily basis, and hopefully it's helpful to everyone else.
Yeah, trends I think is the best. It's the best tool we have. I mean, I love our player models and the fact that you can build your own models. I think the power of FantasyLabs is in the trends. You can just do a million things. I mean, you could just spend all day looking up things and finding hidden value. And now that it's free, please go try it out. Let us know what trends you find, because there's a lot of cool ones in there. So I like that call. My stat of the day is about Ozuna, like I mentioned earlier. In the last 26 games, Ozuna has a dud percentage of 7%. Dud percentage is the percentage where he's been less than half of what we would expect him to be. Usually for batters, that happens very, very often in MLB DFS. There's just a lot of volatility in batters. And Ozuna has just never had that happen in the last month. He's just been crushing, like you mentioned earlier. So he's very expensive. He's more expensive than even Stanton against the lefty, which is sort of crazy. But he's got a smoking hot bat right now. So if you're looking for a sort of safe guy in cash games and as well tournaments, if you can fit him in, he's definitely a great play right now. Okay, let's end it with a bold call, and we'll send people out on this fantastic 5-game slate. You got a bold call for me, Pete?
It's tough to have a bold call on this slate, but my bold it is really tough. But my bold call is A-Rod with my Yankee stack is going to be the guy. I don't want to call it double down, but I'm going to call an A-bomb for A-Rod here on Memorial Day. So that's my bold call. It's tricky. Definitely a good opportunity to be contrarian on this slate. So that I'm trying to stick with the Yankees theme here, and he's going to be the guy I think that does it.
Yeah, I like that. So my bold call was the Stanton double dong, which seems just such a cheap thing. I mean, it's a small slate, and calling it a Stanton double dong. I mean, I guess a double dong is bold anytime it happens, but it's not that bold. I'm sort of ashamed of myself, but I'll stick with it anyway.
I like it. I like Stan. It's keep investing in the long-term stats, which is what you want to do in baseball. And I think Stan turns it around, and hopefully it's in this game. Obviously, we want to make sure he's in the lineup and everything, but
Of course,
yeah, I think he will be, and hopefully has a great game.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, everyone, thanks for listening. I know it's an interesting day of MLB DFS with just the breakdown of games tomorrow, but it's a holiday, so build your lineups, eat some barbecue, and do your thing. Enjoy the day off and enjoy MLB, and also enjoy some NBA playoffs for Game 7. Pete, I assume that you're taking Warriors.
Yeah, I'm on the Warriors, but we'll see what happens. I'm definitely nervous. Will be no more investing on my end, and just hope to see the Warriors take it down.
Good luck to you, and good luck to all you guys. Thanks for listening. As always, we'll talk to you tomorrow night for the Tuesday slate.